Welcome to It Takes Heart. I'm Kate.
And I'm Sam, and we can't wait to share more incredible stories of healthcare professionals making an impact across Australia.
One of my best jobs in my life before midwifery had been running the hostel for the homeless women. And I think I liked that because it was sort of on a really personal level with the women. First time I'd actually scrubbed in, I was like, oh, and then the next thing I knew, I had my hands inside a woman's abdomen and they were saying, just pull apart. It's better to be torn rather than cut. Rock back and pull. 4 weeks ago, I was unblocking the photocopier.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land of which we meet, who for centuries have shared ancient methods of healing and cared for their communities. We pay our respects to elders past and present.
The midwife that we're chatting with today has had an incredible life. Born into an Air Force family in Singapore, Lorraine Evans has travelled the world and certainly had an eclectic career, which included managing a hostel for homeless women, media sales in London, teaching English in Thailand, then PA work in the UK before studying midwifery. In 2012, she landed in Australia with her midwifery degree and a goal to see as much of this country's vast landscapes as she could. There's never a dull moment in Lorraine's life. She's even a wine judge in her spare time, and she arrived today carrying a backpack full of wine, which we loved. Although I don't know if it's been given to us, but let's see. We can wait and see. But
strategically sitting in your office.
I know, right? I'll pop it in there. The team at Cornerstone say Lorraine is kind, caring, and just so incredibly fun. And we are so proud to have her as part of our Cornerstone community. So welcome, Lorraine, to It Takes Heart.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming in again. I think truth telling, this is the second time that we've recorded an episode with you, because the first time was a few months ago when we met you, but we met you via Zoom, and we had a few technical issues that day, and we thought, we know that Lorraine is just life and soul, and we wanted to see you in person.
Oh, no pressure.
But we also didn't have a studio.
We didn't have a studio. We were in sort of in an off-site, and it just still, that day just kind of was...
It went from bad to worse.
It was really difficult. We learnt a lot that day. So it's so nice. Thank you for swinging by on your way, I believe, up to the Sunshine Coast.
Yes, that's right.
On a bit of a holiday with your friend.
Yes.
So before we kick off then, wine judging, I think the benefit of being in person is that we can set the tone for today a little bit differently to on Zoom.
Right.
Now, tell me, first of all, how do you become a wine judge?
Well, I'm a wine judge, by default, because in Cairns they have a wine show, and I started as a steward, which is the person in the back who just pours the wine, but you don't get paid for it; it's voluntary work. So they allow you to sit in on some judging, and if they're judging 70 Shirazes, you might get 30, and you have your score sheet, and you do your thing, and then you sit down with the judges. This is when you're still a steward, if you'd like to, and then you compare scores. And this, every time I was always, yes, me, I want to do that for as many times as I could during the week.
Appreciate.
And but you have to sign a waiver to spit. But as nurses will know, and doctors, whatever, that alcohol is absorbed through your mouth. That is the fastest way into the bloodstream. Well, there's also the alternative. But usually, like for a baby that's got a low blood sugar, for example, we don't give it to drink the sugar. We actually rub it into the gums. Yeah. So a lot of alcohol is actually, you can't drive to a wine judging, because, even though you do spit out the amount that you've potentially taken, quite a lot of the alcohol has been absorbed. But I started off not great, but then as I was doing this, I think it's been like 11 years now, and I've been a judge maybe the last 5. Oh, wow. And it just became to the point where I was able to fight my corner. I did a wine course. I met up with the other wine judges that were local to Cairns for these wine evenings where it's disguised and you pour yours and you have questions, and therefore I just got further and further into the wine. But when the judges are all introduced to them, to each other at the start of each wine show, they always say, this is blah-de-blah, and they've been working for Brook Brothers for this many years, and here's the winemaker from South Australia, and then they get to me and they say, and here's Lorraine the midwife, and she drinks a lot of wine.
So, I think that's a great intro.
I think so.
Well, Kate and I, this is Kate, and she drinks a lot of wine too. And we thought, as do I, her friend, we were like, well, we would love to give you our favourite rosé and get you to judge our rosé.
Okay.
Before we get started. So I'm going to get Kate to pour. And then
We'll see if
also we can enjoy that throughout the podcast. But
There was a...
maybe we might take two
Kate's
on
not
that.
used to
We need
pouring.
that.
She's
Sorry.
just used to receive.
Oh,
What did you do?
no, it's
And
broken
she's
in a
smashed her whole glass.
Oh my
So
goodness.
we're going to get you to do the next one.
We'll have to have one of them in a
I'll
straight
have a
side.
glass.
Do
Do
we
you want
need
to pass me
to?
over
Do
that?
we just cut and do
No,
we need to
we
get,
can just go.
do we
It's
need
real.
to-
Come on, let's. I don't mind. I'm from Toowoomba, so I'm happy to have mine no matter which way.
Thank you.
This
You're
is
from
yours. When I grew up, we had it in a bag strapped to the clothesline.
Oh, I heard there was that...
Goon Fortune.
Yes,
That's
Goon
what I've come from.
Fortune.
Goon Fortune.
Fortune.
We strap it up to the clothesline and spin it
and-
around the
and
backyard.
where it stops instead of
Where
like
it
spin the
stops.
bottle. Yes.
So tell us a little bit about this rosé.
Oh goodness, you put me absolutely on the spot. So, well, one of the first things that and you must always remember that I'm doing fake it till you make it always.
As are we.
Yes.
Is that
We just
I would
smashed a
I
glass.
yes, it's the first one of the day. I would steal your questions for a second. You
Yes.
need pure white behind because you're going to look at the colour first.
Right.
And obviously this is being a rosé, there it is in between the two. So I would imagine this one has only been lightly left in contact with the skins, but who knows?
Right.
And then we'll go for whether or not we've got something decent on the nose, and
Is that decent on your nose?
it certainly is.
Pleasant.
And your nose can smell more than your tongue can taste, so there should be quite a lot going on here. And then we get the little tiny bit into your mouth. Mm-hmm.
So
And then-
you kept that in your mouth.
Yeah,
Longer
kept it-
than
Kate and I could have had 3 glasses
yes,
in that
but that
time.
time. But what you're doing is you're actually letting it go underneath your tongue, and then you're breathing in to allow air to go over it so that you can actually taste the
need to
flavours.
practice
And
again.
then you'll notice that there's more than one layer to the wine. If it's a good wine, it should taste different as you...
I can't get myself to breathe and
And
taste.
yes, this is why and a lot of people make a strange noise when
Yeah.
they do that. But, it's not that important. But you do need to keep it in your mouth and let it. So it's like a journey from the start, the first taste, until you actually swallow. And then there should still be some flavours. And that's sort of the length of the wine as to whether or not the wine has, lots of character, lots going on. But
appreciate that a little bit more now.
I know.
But
Thank you for the little tips.
But it doesn't mean that you have to have fabulous wine. The sign of a good wine is that you've opened the bottle and then you look around and it's gone.
True.
and
Someone
it's-
smashed a glass.
but that everyone's enjoying it. That it hasn't got to be an award-winning wine to be a good wine to have with your friends or with a meal. And sometimes those wines are so intense that you wouldn't want more than one glass. And that's why they sell those fancy smancy, aerating gas that will mean that you can keep those bottles of wine, because actually it's too much. It's like it's such an experience you wouldn't want to drink the bottle. So there's wine for different occasions, and this is delicious.
This is wine
Thank
for
you.
a podcast.
This
Yes,
Well,
delicious.
cheers to that, and
Thank you.
enjoy that while you're here. We can absolutely get a top up if we need as well. Now that Kate's poured that
Tech
glass.
team will just be going nuts that we've got so much liquid near
All the equipment, yes.
near all the equipment. But Anywho.
Korea.
Oh,
Let's talk about Korea.
my cheat nose.
This will be the first time when we've ever had to cut an episode because we put wine into it. Now we're just like, whoa!
hopefully we won't have to do
Sorry,
take
we're not
3.
really sure what Lorraine. What chat about with Lorraine? Not sure, but God, it was fun.
I feel like I know more things. So going to your career, wine judging, we heard.
Which is only a hobby.
Yes,
And
I was going to say that is not a career point.
Can
That was
I
that.
just
It's a
say
career
that
for
I
some.
am like the lowest of the low in this
Yes.
scenario, and I'm not a top
I think it's a
wine
wonderful
judge.
hobby.
Yeah, I think I need a hobby like that. Just a hobby in general. But anyway, good hobbies. But I think you're saying the careers like that we talked about in the beginning. So many
Yeah.
different avenues you've worked.
Yeah. How did you come to midwifery? Why did you choose midwifery?
Well, midwifery, I realised because I was born in Singapore. My parents were stationed in Malaysia, and we always moved every 3 years. It was constant of moving. Even if we went back to Berlin, for example, for 3 tours, we were always moving. We were always making sort of new friends and learning. And you could never get bored because there was always something. Nothing just went on. You never assume you've got all the time in the world to do something because you won't be here next year. You'll be somewhere else. You just got to keep moving. And then, of course, my parents retired, and I managed to pick a university course that came with a year abroad. And that was... that actually was part of my choosing of American studies, was a year in America. How fabulous. I must do that. American literature, never been more interesting.
Yep, I bet.
So I often don't make my decisions based on the most logical of reasons. And I've been, traveling there. I encouraged a partner in the past to take a job in Hong Kong because I thought that would be interesting. He had never lived abroad in his life, but we went there. That didn't work out, but I realised wasn't keen to just stay in the UK. And I started to think, well, what jobs would I be able to do that would enable the travel and a relocation from London? Because London is fabulous, as I imagine Sydney is, if you're wealthy, and pretty awful if you're on a low wage. And one of my best jobs in my life before midwifery had been running the hostel for the homeless women, and I think I liked that because it was sort of on a really personal level with the women, getting to know them, getting to understand, getting to help them to get themselves back on their feet, get their benefits sorted out, get them new accommodation. After the hostel, there was a limited time that they could stay there, so setting them up to go on. And I just realised that when I had done that job before midwifery for the longest of all my jobs, and then I tried all these different things, and I was in property and being a PA in an international property company, and then I was flying business class to Chicago in my suit and heels and my briefcase and doing all of those things. But I never enjoyed it as much as I did when I was working with the women in the hostel. And so when I thought, right, what jobs can I do that will take me out of the UK? And America was actually on my list. And thank goodness we've dodged that bullet, as it just goes from bad to worse there. But also that... and of course, healthcare was on the list. And then the more I looked into it, midwifery, of course, was back with working with women. And also, just that whole sort of miracle of life that it's a real privilege. Well, I think in nursing, a lot of people who've got their calling, I have a friend who's works in palliative care back in the UK, and I could not do that, but she is fabulous at that. But there's like a place that you're drawn to, I think, in healthcare. And for me, the idea in midwifery is that you actually have healthy women on the whole, doing a normal and natural process. And it's actually the sort of almost the reverse of healthcare. You're trying to limit the interference of healthcare to give them the most positive, normal experience that they can have, unless they do have health issues or anything that needs specific attention. And then it's your job as a midwife to ensure that they're safe and that that's happening too. So I decided to do the midwifery course and come away, and Australia was looking for midwives, and I thought, well, this is fantastic. I can get back to my palm trees, my fun sort of more relaxed lifestyle. And I sort of bit the bullet and came over to Australia not long after I had graduated.
So that's an interesting piece, like to graduate and then come out to Australia. Was it hard to get your ARPA registration?
Not at all.
For a job? Or
was the work? English system of training midwives, even I'm a direct entry midwife, not also nurse trained, at that point was of such a high level. You'll have had delivered many more babies than you're required, 40 or 60. I can't even remember. It was so long now. But I think that you're exposed to the real world of midwifery as a student in London. You really are. I caught my first baby on my first day in the hospital.
Wow.
With another midwife. And I did not expect that. I remember being in theatres 2 or 3 weeks later, first time I'd actually scrubbed in and I was like, oh, and then the next thing I knew, I had my hands inside a woman's abdomen, and they were saying, just pull apart. It's better to be torn rather than cut. Rock back and pull. And I was thinking, good Lord, 4 weeks ago I was unblocking the photocopier.
Oh my God.
Now I'm sort of have my hands inside this lady and I'm pulling her abdomen apart. My God.
Oh my God.
Here in Australia, actually, when you attend a a caesarean birth, the Australian midwives are not quite so hands-on.
I was just thinking about my caesarean birth, and I'm like,
the midwife was not involved.
No one was there. It was just the doctor.
Here
you go.
Yes.
Yeah,
The midwives in England are really into that. A lot of them are trained in passing the instruments to the doctor. You're often asked to hold a certain one to help them, and yes, you fully scrub in. Whereas here, you put a pair of gloves and a gown, and you're all set and just take the baby. But I just was taken aback and astounded by how quickly. And I did actually work for almost a year in London as a qualified midwife. So when I started in Cairns, I wasn't a actual grad. I was a fully fledged midwife at that point, because I think by the time I was like 5-6 days short of the full grad year when I left. And because I was sponsored, in fact, by the private hospital initially, I had moved from the public sector to the private sector, which was the same hospital, just had a different wing. And,
This was in Cairns?
This was in London.
In London,
Chelsea and Westminster.
Oh, right. I used to place allied health staff in Chelsea and Westminster when I was working in London,
So
That's a hustly, bustly place to get your training.
So I had experienced both being the autonomous midwife in London, where you don't have, the doctors are not your boss. In fact, you look after the women and make your decisions. And if you think you need some assistance, you call a doctor. And if you don't like what the doctor's saying, you can call his or her boss and get a second opinion. And only if you're sort of ganged up by many would you be having to do what they're suggesting. If you were hoping to have this woman was hoping to have a natural birth. But in the private sector in London, you learned that the consultant was the boss, and whatever they said was what was going to happen. And that was very good training for me before going to the private and even Australian midwifery, because you are, the doctors, the seniors have the power to say what happens in these situations. So that was a learning curve for me, that midwifery is slightly different in Australia.
Yeah,
but
I remember the midwife not being able to examine me because it had to be the doctor in my situation.
Yes, it's different, and you have to learn, to adapt. And there's different things here that you aren't expected to do in the UK, but then but you would be really high skilled at it. And then there's things here that you are expected to do, and we're like, what? Hang on,
right.
This isn't. And please don't ask me to give an example, but I know that there is
been those moments along the way.
Yeah.
Did you come to a job, or did you?
Yes, I was sponsored, and I came on out, and I really embraced the far north Queensland. I suddenly took up sailing for the first time. I loved the fact that I could be in the swimming pool, an hour before my shift, whether that was under the stars or under the sun, looking up through the palm fronds before I drove my 6 minutes to work and parked for free, compared to the London allow 2 hours, planes, trains, automobiles, journey of hell in the freezing cold. Fairy godmother waved a wand in terms of my Australian, immigration.
So how long did you work, I guess, permanently in that role?
I would say nearly 7 years in the private, and for various reasons it was time for me to go, and that's when the fantastic opportunity arose that I realised I could either go over to the public, or I could take advantage of what was looking like being quite a fixed position, much as I really love Cairns, and I have an apartment, and I have friends, and I belong to different social groups and 2 gyms, and not that you'd think so.
2 gyms?
2 gyms. There's always going to be something I want to do.
I was just going to say, 2. I was struggling to get to the one that I joined.
And I realised that through doing agency work, that I would have this sort of freedom of being able to see Australia, and not because I wasn't seeing that much of Australia when on the full-time work, and I was also going to have more challenges than just following on and then seeing 20 years on my retirement still the same sort of set of people, the same situations, the same repeating, which is what was driving me mad in London in the PA job. Was, oh my goodness, am I getting this guy's kid's ski insurance again? Oh, are we renewing his car his car registration again? The years were ticking by these repetitive events, and I just have loved that. Through the agency, I've gone from Tasmania to Thursday Island to South Australia to Western Australia to South Queensland and so forth, and all sort of paid for by agency work, and still been able to maintain my home in Cairns while having these experiences. And almost every contract that I've done, I've met someone that's remained in my life as, a friend, someone who, whether it's a doctor, whether it's another midwife, it's just been a really good way to meet people and sort of have or another agency midwife who isn't even from where I'm working, but just is, in the same situation. And
I think when you're turning up with a backpack of wine,
I feel like I'd be a friend too.
My friend is expecting that wine in the sunny
days. I know. So do you then go back to Cairns and do some work there, or do you have a break in between contracts?
I'm casual, and I love this sort of freedom of having like this sort of idea of I know when I'll say I'll do a contract, and that's allocated, and there's usually enough work that if I say can I work now, there's my agent Becky will find something for me around then. And I also, when I'm back in Cairns, decide put myself forward as a casual, and I predominantly work in the special care there. And then I also, so I have this freedom. And what I have loved is I'm still such a big traveller. And I've been to the US last September, October for a friend's daughter's engagement party. Then I went back for the wedding in Texas in May. And I'm just currently booking a trip that involves air miles to get me to Milan, and then I go all the way through Italy, and an American friend's meeting me there, and then I'm meeting a British friend in Genoa, and then we're going all the way through the south of France until I meet up with my family, my sister, my niece, my mother in the south of France, and then cut round in another loop to get back to Italy again before coming back. And the joy of working for contracts and being casual is that I don't have to put in a performer and ask for time off. I don't have to wait and see if I'm allowed. Well, that bargain airfares sitting there only for this weekend only, and if you have to go through HR that you're not going to be able to get that approved for 10 days minimum, that bargain flight, that air miles offer is mine, and I can make that decision and just go for it. And that's what I've really loved. And a lot of sometimes when maybe there's not a lot of casual work, where I live. People are like, you need to get a full-time job, you'll feel much. And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't want that responsibility again and then being tied to one place.
There will always be work.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
There'd be loads of challenges, I'm sure, as well. Like, you've spoken a lot about what you love about that contract work, but we see so many things where people don't love a community they've gone to, or the team they're with maybe isn't a great match, or, just the lack of resources, staff shortages, staying in staff quarters.
Yeah, some of them are.
Give us the warts and all.
Sometimes.
Yeah. I think it's good for people because people ask those questions like, what is it actually like? And I think it's really good to have an insight into what's bad, because you can be well prepared. Sometimes it's like, it's actually not that bad.
Mm-hmm. Or I think it depends on the personality. I think it's not for everyone, is probably fair to say too.
Yes. I think that one of the things is I have had some fabulous accommodation, and I have also had some, the best is when it's so bad. When it's so bad that you can complain without looking like a princess.
Yeah.
And that happened on a recent contract. And I was, I turned up, it was quite late, and I got to the place, and honestly, it looked... I honestly, it looked like something from a movie set of a crack den.
Oh, wow,
and
like a Tarantino movie.
It was so bad and so repellent. I mean, I've actually showed people photos where people have actually said, I can't look anymore. I can't look at that at all. Wow. And so I phoned back to the hospital, and there's always somebody responsible, and said, look, I'm sorry, but I really can't stay. And they're like, is it bad? I'm like, yes, very bad. And they said, get a taxi back. We've got backup for this. We'll sort you out for tonight. I can't say that's where you're going to be for the whole contract, but we've got something for tonight that isn't, and I showed the particular, nurse manager the photos, and her language was choice too. She's like, no way.
In agreement or just...
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, that's good.
And then the manager of the unit that I met the next day and was like, I am coming in. I just need to do this, and this. I've got to go into the post office. Some of the requirements are that you get working with children in certain states, but you can't apply until you get there. Right. There's a lot of challenges, and you just have to sort of follow through with how all those things work. But I said, and I don't know where I'm going to go, but I'm certainly not staying in the place. And I showed her the photos, and she was so distressed that she insisted I forward them to her, and then sent them, I think, to all the senior people in the hospital, saying, and this is why we can't get agency to stay. We have to do better than this. And this room needs to, the mattress, anything in this room needs to be burnt.
That's good, though, that they understood and respect the role of the agency nurse, because it's true. It's all those little things then that make you go, I'm not going back there.
Yeah. And I have predominantly, really, either I've been very lucky or is that I have had, good experiences on the whole. Sometimes, yes, it can get to the point where you think this isn't actually, there's not enough of us here. There's a sudden sickness, and then somebody else doesn't turn up for because agency, they're expecting people, and then I don't know, maybe they had another offer or something, or changed their mind, and then everyone's counting on someone turning up. And it can get crazy, which on the one hand can be fabulous because you end up with overtime, and who doesn't love a bit of overtime in the bank balance, but also a little bit overwhelming when you're suddenly expected to do shift after shift after shift without a break. As you say, in these areas where, sometimes you're waiting on the, RFDS to come help, and there's only so many planes, and there's many more jobs, and you're on a wait list, and you're just trying to maintain a situation where you wait for your information that the plane's at the airport, and then you get to do the sort of fun ride in the ambulance with the ambos and the blue light to the airport, and do the handover on the tarmac, sometimes in the driving rain, and you sort of it has almost a sort of a quality of, yes, I'm very glad that I left the UK and I'm not still trudging 2 hours to a job and repeat of the day before.
Yeah, no day would ever be the same. Because you have to live it. Was there a security guard helping one of the births?
No, just that, it was just actually, I was quite distressed that there wasn't enough backup, and I actually made a quite inappropriate joke that the only backup was that one of the security guards once saw an episode of One Born Every Minute, and that was all.
I mean, the whole area that you practice in, having babies is unpredictable.
Absolutely.
So if you're in a more rural area, I know that they have things in place to move women to maybe a larger hospital if it is a complex pregnancy or things like that. But things happen. With
they do. They
routine
do.
pregnancy.
And they
what
happen at once.
Then?
They happen at once. The worst is the lull. Once you've had in remote areas sort of 7+ days with no deliveries and no drama, it's coming, and it's coming at once. It's all going to happen, bang, bang, bang. It's going to be people trying to deliver in the corridor because all the births, your 2 or 3 birth suites are full, and there's, it happens like that, which I quite like, that rush. And I also then quite like those periods of quiet where you can sort of get to know the other people that you're working with, and, that's when all the checks are done and everything's sorted ready for the, you're almost preparing for that tsunami of women through the door, which will happen.
And
I was just going to say, I feel like last time we talked about this, that one birth that's really affected you, or the one that's been, a particularly challenging one that's gone okay in the end. Is there any of those?
I think, I don't know, even because there's been several. I think being in a very, very remote area once, and having and being on night shift as the only midwife in the hospital, and suddenly, someone has been admitted through ED, and it's such a small hospital that they haven't phoned to tell me. She's just appeared from ED through the doors into my section, and I can tell the way she's walking that she's in labour. She's with another lady, and I'm thinking, well, at least she looks quite large. So because I have a list of who we're expecting, and I know she's not one of them because I've met them in the last week, and as MGP, and you get to know the women, and I'm like, I don't recognise this woman, but she's quite large. So one hopes that she's not too prem, but unfortunately it turned out that it was 26-week twins on board, and her waters had gone, and but we actually handled it really, really well. And I say we, I mean I phoned the cavalry and got everyone in, and luckily everyone had their phone on, and the 2 anaesthetists for the 2 twins, two obstetricians, all the midwives we could get hold of. And we actually had more time than we thought. We had probably almost 3 hours from her admission to her delivery of those very premature twins. And we're on telehealth to a major hospital where they're all watching us and giving direction. Because it was so remote, they needed to see that the babies were born alive before they put into place the transfer, because they, turn up and we didn't have success. And so there was a lot of time of keeping those babies going before they were able to be transferred. But that was fantastic. And it was close enough to where I lived that I was able to see that lady after she had gone further afield than where I live, and then came back to there. And then I was able to be there when she was discharged with those twins. So eventually, at term. So a full many weeks, many months after. And then because the world of midwifery is so small in Australia, that when I was on my last placement just in September, on the other side of Australia, I was asked to mentor a student in Birth Suite, and I said, "Hello, I'm," and she said, "Of course." She said, "Don't you remember me? I was there when the twins were born." So she was now in her final year of. I was like, I don't remember anything about the night the twins were born. But yes, and of course I recognised her then, but out of context of where we were. So so things have overlapped like that. And when you do a midwifery job as a contract, even if you've never met the other midwives there, if you because I'm of a Facebook age, I guess, and I think isn't it only for the over 40s.
So funny. Yes. We are in that group. Yes.
If you go on, you will always put in the new person that you've just met on the contract. Even they will have friends that There's such a small community of midwives, so you'll be able to say, "Oh, so and so. Oh, yes, I met them on that contract."
I love that.
And so you're able to sort of make all those connections that way.
Where's the craziest place you've delivered a baby? Has there been anywhere you go, "God, that was a bit"?
Well, I think those twins there were that was pretty hairy. I mean,
ever not in a hospital? And
well, I did in London. In London, you train a lot with the home births, and I can't claim this as my own, but I remember in London too that a friend delivered a woman in the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital lifts, and she got onto her knees and she said. She had a wool coat on coming just back from her break, and she said, "I couldn't believe it. I had it dry cleaned last week." And then, of course, everything had run up her arms from delivering this baby on her knees and the woman standing in the lift. Yes.
Of all the hospital lifts, though, in London, I feel like that would have probably been one of the nicer ones. The Chelsea Westminster.
But they never come when you want them. She might have been there a week trying to get up there. Sweet.
You talked before about the telehealth support and, thinking about someone who's considering going out to a remote or regional area. Do you feel supported enough when those scenarios happen and you are talking to someone in telehealth?
I think, yes. So the telehealth situation is mainly doctor to doctor in that sense. Or I think nurse, not midwife. So sometimes it might be an obstetric situation on, say, a small island up at the top of Australia where those very isolated nurses are suddenly faced with an obstetric situation, and then they might be on telehealth to us. Directing, and I'm trying to talk a nurse through how to find a fetal heart on the lady that she's with and things like that. But I think that wherever I have been placed through Cornerstone as well, I have always had the support of an on-call doctor, and most of them are within 10, 15 minutes. And they've got different personalities and different degrees of involvement. So there's been some, consultants on some projects that want to know, wake me up in the middle of the night, tell me if there's somebody in labour, and when they're at second stage about to have a baby, I want to know. I want to be in the hospital, so if something goes wrong, I'm right there. To other doctors who say, well, if you're midwives, you know what you're doing. Don't wake me up and tell me you're having a baby. That's your job. Only call me if there's a problem. I'll be there. So it just depends. And it's the same hospital. It just depends who's on call, which doctors at that point. And that's the thing with contracts. And I meet other agency midwives on my travels, and they always are surprised that I'm on my second or third tour of duty of that place, and they're like, I never go back. You always think it's going to be, but just accept your first contract and keep moving, because when you go back, things have changed. There's different management or different doctors or different people working. And, you had such a great time, and then you can lose that sort of memory of that if you don't have that repeat time. But, on the whole, I have enjoyed going back, and there's something nice about being asked to go back, and it's sort of...
I think it clearly really suits you, this whole travelling locum lifestyle, and I think it sounds like you've got to be a really good communicator to make it work, because even understanding those nuances when you get to a contract of how am I going to communicate with this doctor, how would they like us, how will they communicate with us, and vice versa, that's a skill in itself, isn't it, to be able to understand and to give the time to get to know that hospital. I
think that the places where we're going, they're quite used to agency staff as well, and they even have some of them a little guide to the doctors. Exactly, and it's not just their glove size. As to what to look out for them. So,
do you have a favourite place?
I was just about to ask that. It's interesting. I'd never actually thought about not going back to the same place
to ruin the memories.
I really agree with that now. Not for Asia, go back to the same place multiple times. We should be promoting that.
But even if you did have a less pleasant experience that first time, it could be completely different
another time. Yes,
and so don't rule anything out is maybe the message there.
Exactly. And I think taking enough. For me, I never travel light. Taking enough of your own things so that you can prepare food, or
what's in your before you get to favourites? Like, what's in your suitcase that you take?
A pillow, because if you end up with a hospital plastic pillow, you're going to be distressed by that. Yeah. If I try and find out what size bed I'm getting, and if possible, I put in an extra set of linen, so to just be sure that you've got something that's clean when you first arrive, or something that is of a decent quality. Yeah. But then I'm absolutely a massive op shopper, and most places that I've worked, there's a few exceptions, but most places have an op shop, and I'm on the first day as I can, my first day off.
Thought of that. What a great idea.
And then I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to be frustrated by the fact that I can't cook because somebody's used the pan and hasn't washed it up. But you can't take big frying pans and all of these sorts of equipment with you. So I just go down the op shop and shell out a few essentials after having checked out what's in the kitchen, and sort of like okay, now I know I can do this quite easily, and that's going to be that. And then I donate them either back to the op shop or to the kitchen when I go. And that sort of works out too. And just, it's having that flexibility to go somewhere new and not be... And I had some great advice when I went to America at university for that year abroad, and the professor said something like, it's be very easy when you go somewhere that's similar to where you are and be very frustrated by the differences, because... what do you mean go from England to America? What do you mean you have to pay for banking, which at that time you did in the States and not in the UK? What do you mean this closes on a Friday? What do you mean? And you're very like, this place is crazy. What's wrong with these people? Whereas if you went from the UK to Africa, you'd be like, things are closed on Friday. Well, that's Africa.
Yes.
And it's like having the attitude of just stop comparing. It's different. And just because there's so many similarities, don't just accept there's going to be differences between where
and
you go.
And embrace them, I guess,
And you're there for difference, right?
Yeah.
You don't go to different countries and different places in hope that it's all the same.
No.
Otherwise you just stay home.
Exactly. And one of the great things that I found is, this is varied from place to place, is how involved the people that do live there, or the other agency in terms of, one of them might have a car, is how interested they are in helping you sightsee, or inviting you to their homes, or having you
welcoming you into the community and allowing you to enjoy it. Because on your days off, do you explore always?
I try to see as much as possible, and that it depends, because of course some contracts come with a car. As technology advances, it's becoming more restrictive, because they can see on their GPS where you've been, and it shouldn't be Dan Murphy's,
No. I was thinking, because you can't do your hobby of wine judging online, really.
No.
Have you got other hobbies that you're taking there?
So yes, Tasmania was fantastic, but it's probably not a good look to have the the health car outside the vineyard.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yes, sometimes you have it. It's
Could
nice.
be an emergency.
I was just going to say, unless you're delivering a baby.
Yes, exactly. Don't mind me.
Yeah.
No, I think. Yes, I try to play, and there's always somebody. Even on my last very short contract, there was a lovely lady that took me out, and I to see a fantastic beach, and she had a huge 4-wheel drive, and we drove over the top of these dunes and came down to this, surreal clear blue water and white, crystal white sand, and I was like, is this real? It's so insane. And then we got in. There was a sort of an inlet, and I said, but there's no crocs. And she said, well, we'd be really unlucky. I'm like, yes, we would be. We would.
Yeah.
But
Where's your favourite location been, or your top three?
No, you see, it's all about the people, as I say. Yeah. So, and for different reasons. And so, like, I've met one of my very good friends when I was in Rockhampton. And, unless you're really into the steak, Rockhampton has got a lot to look at. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
but, it's not like a top. But then I did have a fantastic trip from.
There's a lot to see from there.
Yeah, I went to the Keppel Islands, for example. Yeah. And also, they have Yeppoon, the WAGs, the Wednesday afternoon guys and girls sailing. So I also took up sailing. So I was able to do some sailing on when I was in Rockhampton. And so, and there's always some festival. And I tend to encourage the other staff to sign up for a pub quiz. I love a pub quiz. And I try to also make that a mix of doctors as well as midwives and nurses, which doesn't always go down well initially. But then when we win, it does, because we've got a much broader sense of ages and sexes and, knowledge, interests to be able to win. So, I've sort of... I've enjoyed that aspect of it. And, in Tasmania, I mean, who can't love Tasmania except it's cold?
Yeah.
But in terms of the food and the drink and, and I've sort of loved being part of a remote island experience up in Thursday Island, because that is also pretty unique and not something that I would want to do. I wouldn't want to move there and have all the inconveniences of living that come with that, particularly as a, single woman, being up there alone, very limited. But how fantastic to do that for, 2 months or a few weeks even, just very lucky to have that opportunity.
And is there anywhere still on your bucket list?
Oh, plenty. Yeah. South Australia, far more, I think I'd like to see. Kangaroo Island. And, I remember hadn't really considered, I think South Australia is like sort of, they're keeping it in the same way that Australians as the whole are trying to put off the rest of the world with tales of dangerous creatures that really aren't part of our everyday life at all. Yeah. I still think South Australia's got their little curtains drawn and like, don't notice we're fantastic. Because I remember going down for actually a sad reason to see a friend who had terminal cancer and to say goodbye, but then phoning my agent here at Cornerstone to say, do you do work here? When I was in Adelaide, do you do work down here? This is have you seen these beaches? Because my agent's also from the UK. I was like, it's like the Caribbean down here. What's going on? Why haven't you told us about this? Why isn't everybody in South Australia? Well, the great whites might be one reason, but then you can argue for the creatures anywhere. Yes. So I think there's more to see in South Australia. It's a shame that New South Wales doesn't have fantastic rates, but because I think there's plenty there, and I'd love to sort of tie that in with a festival. Who wouldn't want to go, to
before they stop being a thing? Yeah. I've got to come back to the single woman thing.
Right.
Now, we've talked about this on another podcast with another single lady, and how do you, travelling around...
Who, then found someone, so maybe we had something to do with that.
Oh, did we?
Yes, well...
being out on contract in these small communities... And
it can have its moments. There can be fun, and there also you have to be so careful when it's so tiny. If you were to go on any of the online apps, it's going to be immediately obvious. You're going to see it, and then you're going to see them the next day in the hospital.
Yes.
So very careful there. But no, there's an opportunity, I think, as a single person to have, widen, some of the places I'd say are less of a gene pool and more of a sort of a murky puddle. and then other places you might just hit lucky.
Yeah.
Or, of course, traveling on your way or meet someone. And of course, I'd love for dating to go back to the more organic and introductions. But of course, by doing these contracts, I am meeting more people from different places who are inviting me to go visit.
And I think when you're in these smaller communities, they tend to do a lot of things, from those regional...
The quizzes and the community
days,
events. There's more. There's probably less. There's probably less people on the app, so it's more of an organic experience.
Well, exactly. So, some of the smaller places. So, there was a much bigger disparity between doctors' pay and nurses' pay in the UK. And so doctors at the end of most shifts would say, come on out for a drink. That was terrible. Let's all go out for a drink, and put their card behind the bar. And that has never happened, sort of in Australia. But I think it's because nurses aren't starving here.
Yeah.
Whereas in the
UK... now, once your episode goes live, the next doctor you're working with will send it to them and be like, you need to pop the card behind the bar.
Yeah. But I think because, they were fully aware back home that, and I think unfortunately that because they haven't increased the salaries back there for so long that you qualify for food stamps as a nurse.
Wow.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Whereas here, of course, and particularly in agency work, you are given a very decent wage to live on. So the idea is that a doctor shouldn't have to cover all the drinks. But in these smaller, and you actually don't see them outside of work unless you convince them to go to a quiz. But in these smaller areas, there's only the one pub anyway.
Yeah.
So you will get to sort of socialise. You will be drunkenly singing karaoke with everybody from the hospital, from cleaning and catering staff all the way up to the head of the hospital, because that's the place to go.
Yeah.
And so that is a sort of another interesting aspect of getting, being fully part of the healthcare. Yeah.
What would you, when you look back on the highlight reels of all these years of locuming, is there a memory, like the best memory that you think that really makes you laugh and brings a smile to your face?
So I know you're fishing because you know the story of the time that
That is so unlike
Did you need a refill?
Go on then, you fill that, and I'll say. I did have a little incident, I guess, where I had just had a little fling with one of the rescue team, with the helicopter rescue team, and he had come to say goodbye at the airport, and unfortunately there was an incident at the airport where somebody had collapsed, and so we of course also got involved while waiting for the ambulance, and we had kept our situation quite secret, and but then we were both involved in this incident, doctors arriving, cannulations happening with defibs, it's all going on, and then I suddenly realised actually my plane's going, and so across the patient we sort of leant over the poor man and he kissed me goodbye, and then I stood up and ran for my plane, and everybody else that was involved who I also knew from this very small community were like, what just happened there?
That's a movie waiting to happen.
Is this the way we end these situations now?
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
And he wasn't in uniform or anything, so he was just random man at airport. And then they were like, oh, I know who he is.
Oh my God, to have been flying them all there, you would have been like, what?
I know, and the poor man underneath us was probably like, what are you doing? It's
priority. Me. Someone focus on me.
But he was fine and very stable at that point.
I bet, yeah. You're like, you're sorted. Let's do our goodbye.
Yes. To me.
Just before we wrap up, you've said that, locum work brings soul to your life. What is it about the work?
I think it is that that you're not in the rut, that you do genuinely get to go to a place and you have the opportunity to meet so many people, and sometimes it can be quite difficult because some people might not be thrilled with the healthcare situation or not want to be there at all, and you get to have an opportunity to treat people with the utmost kindness and respect, and maybe just not everybody, but some people turn a situation around to a point where someone who really didn't want to be there, really was quite angry, upset on their arrival, really was facing a tricky situation with the social services or something else, from actually trusting you, and now suddenly maybe turning up for more appointments or understanding what the drug test is for, and that we're trying to prove that you're not prove that you are, that this is going to help you, something being able to, even in a short time sometimes, by just being open and respectful, have an opportunity to make a difference. And I think you can, of course, do that in one place as well. But I think it's almost like a fresh face and, look, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I actually just want to help you is a unique position to be in,
It sounds like your role in London helping women in the shelter has really lent itself
that actually could well be, because, yes, I get very cross when people we all judge. I even have a shirt that a friend gave me which said "silently judging you," and then on the back it says, "and now I'm talking about you," which is bad. But we're all judgy. But when you've know that people don't choose their life path sometimes, and they've had very different choices or opportunities. And I know that have been really fortunate with my life of travel and my opportunities, and my sort of stable family background. And I've just been, all the cards dealt have been very lucky hand, and other people have not. They've ended up with a load of just a hand that doesn't win them anything, and so. To try not to judge. And I get very cross even when people say, can you believe that this woman whose baby, she's got gestational diabetes and she's eating a king-size Mars bar now, and, and now the baby's, this, and, these people. And I'm like, do you know what? If eating a healthy diet was that easy, we'd all be supermodels. Yeah. And we don't know anything about why this woman is eating like this. And I think we can just back off with the rolling of the eyes and and actually just see, well, what can we do today? And I even had an anaesthetist once tell a woman in labour who was requesting an epidural, well, this is going to be very difficult as you're so fat.
Oh my gosh.
And I got very annoyed with him, and I said, not helpful, actually, because you can't do anything about that right now, except you've upset her. So maybe, just unnecessary abuse,
a bit more compassion, please.
Yes, exactly. Just say nothing. If you can't say something kind, don't say nothing at all. But that is what I think is the sort of the soul element of it. Maybe, if that's what you quoted me and I said at one point. But I like this opportunity to, and I sometimes maybe talk too much to people, and I'm still writing my notes later because I've actually. But it's about seeing people, isn't it? It's about. Not just next. And
you're seeing people in quite a vulnerable state, having a baby is not a straightforward, obvious process that people just know what to do. It's...
Yeah, you'd rather have a midwife that was present and talking to you than writing the notes, and you're wondering, what's she writing? Are we all good over here? Yeah.
People would feel lucky to have you in the room with them.
Oh, I completely agree with you.
But I think that some, I would say, not everyone's cup of tea. I think I was given a very helpful advice from one of the consultants that colourful people are remembered and and appreciated by many, but disliked by a few because you're too bright. And that's not bright intelligence; it's just too much. Like I'm not their person, and that's fine too, because you have to have the skin like a rhinoceros if you're going to be sort of.
I saw you're also not everyone's cup of tea, but. It's because you're a glass of champagne.
Yes.
So, when you said that, you looked at me and I was like, am I not everyone's cup of tea?
Too much?
We can talk about the too much. Did you say that? She just looked at me.
I think we're both too much and can relate.
Love it.
Yeah. So, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
It's been so wonderful to spend more time with you today. With this season, we're donating to a charity of your choice. Where should we raise some awareness today?
Well, I would like the donation to go back to Cairns, to the public hospital there, to the Far North Queensland Foundation, because they are helping provide equipment for the hospital that's not on this sort of budget for Queensland Health, but helps people who live there get treatment up there without having to come down to Brisbane, for example, and be separated from the support networks that they would normally have in what is, for example, cancer or major surgery situations. So that's sort of a way I think that would be a nice way to donate.
Yeah,
Lovely,
fantastic.
thank you.
Lorraine, thank you so much. I am so glad that the tech didn't work last
Me
time.
too.
I thought you were saying now.
No, oh my God,
I'm so
I hope
sorry
it
about
has.
the glass
Lord,
and the
imagine if it
bottle.
doesn't. But just, it's so nice to have you in the space, and you are just a phenomenal midwife. And hearing your stories, there were so many things. I mean, we didn't even get to Berlin. There's so much that I feel like we need like a season 3, we need to get you back again. But look, it's been a joy talking to you. Thank you for sharing your stories, and just thank you for being you. You've just been incredible and a great advocate along all of the years that you've worked for us.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning into It Takes Heart. If you love this episode, subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend.
And if you know someone with a great story in healthcare, get in touch. Follow us on socials for all the behind the scenes fun, and we'll see you next time.